gradient. But we can also call it a coefficient. So we have, that's what we can talk about functions. So from functions, we develop what we call equations. And when we talk about functions having an equal sign, that is the definition for equations. So definitions for equations are they are functions that have an equal sign. So when you talk about y equals to a plus b x, this we can talk about it being an equation. And in this case, we talk about it being a linear equation. So we have different types of equations. We have linear equations and non-linear equations. So we have linear equations, and number two, we can talk about non-linear equations. So the case of linear equations is whereby the variables are only raised to a power of 1. We talk about y equals to a plus b x. So they only have a power of 1. However, when you talk about nonlinear equations, we are talking about whereby the variables are raised to a certain degree. So for example, we can talk about an example what we used to have what we call the quadratic equations, whereby you are told ax squared plus bx plus maybe c equals to 0. So these are, because of the equal sign, it is an equation, and because of this power, it is an nonlinear equation. So what we are supposed to understand is how to solve for both linear and non-linear equations. So let us start by linear equations. And when you're talking about linear equations, we mean an equation like this one, 3x minus 4 equals to 2. So such equations, what we need to understand is mathematical rules. And we have mathematical rules. We have the additional rule, we have the subtraction rule, we have the multiplication rule, and the division rule. So all these rules are so important for us to solve for equations, linear and nonlinear equations. So in the case of additional rule, we're talking about m plus n equals maybe p. So in this case, we can say this is additional form. So m plus n minus n equals to p minus n. So m can be expressed in form of p minus n. So we are expressing this equation in this format. That's for additional rule. When we have the subtraction, we have m minus n equals to p. So we can have m minus n plus n. To do away with n from this side, we want to have p minus n. So m equals to p minus n. So this equation can be expressed in this format. And when we talk about the multiplication and division rule, let us apply the division rule first. So in this case, we are talking about 2m equals to p, or mn equals to p. So we are multiplying them at the beginning, then we are talking about they are equal to p. So in that case, m can be expressed as p over n. So we are dividing. So this equation can be expressed in this way. So when you're talking about multiplication rule, we are talking about m over p equals to n. So m can be expressed as p n. So this when you talk about the multiplication rule. So we can take a simple example. So we are talking about the linear equations, and we can take a simple example talking about the one we had. We are talking about 3x minus 4 equals to 2. So to solve for it, we have to 3x minus 4 equals to 2, and here we are talking about subtraction. So we are going to apply the subtraction rule. We have to take about 3x minus 4 plus 4 going to give us 2 plus 4. So in that case, we are going to have 3x minus 0, so going to give us 6. So 3x equals to 6. So we apply the division rule. We divide by 3. We divide by 3. In that case, x equals to what we refer to as 2. So that's our value for x. We can have another example. We talk about 2. We talk about 7 minus x equals to, let's talk about 3. So in that case, we are realizing that we can be rearranged to that. So we are going to apply the additional rule. So it's going to be negative x plus 7 minus 7 to do away with the 7 equals to 3 minus 7. So in that case, we are going to have negative x plus 0 equals to negative 4. So negative x equals to negative 4. So the signs do away, x equals to 4. So that's how we go about the linear functions, the linear equations. So let us talk about nonlinear equations. So when we talk about nonlinear equations, we have said the variables are raised to a given degree. So like the quadratic function, we normally find ourselves with plus c equals to 0. So we can take an example. We talk about 2x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals to 0. So from our high school, we were told we can solve this using factorization. Number 2, we can use complete square method. Also, we can use the quadratic formula. So let us start with what we call factorization. So we are talking about 2x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals to 0. So when we are told about when you are factorizing, we are supposed to come up with a plus b variables that are going to give us the negative 3, and a times b, they are going to give us ac, which is 2 times 1. So in that case, a times b is supposed to be equal to 2. So when you look at, we have negative 3 and this, so we can imagine of the two numbers and we can guess. So we can talk about something like negative 2 and negative 1. So we can substitute for them in the equation. We have 2x squared minus 3x minus plus 1 equals to 0. So when we substitute, we are going to have 2x squared minus 2x minus x plus 1 equals to 0. So we can factorize out the different parts of the equation. We are going to have 2x into x minus, in that case, 1. And then we are going to subtract 1 into x minus 1 equals to 0. So we talk about 2x minus 1 and x minus 1. This is common here and there, going to be 0. So 2x minus 1 equals to 0, or x minus 1 equals to 0. So 2x minus 1 equals to 0. We can solve for that first. So we can say 2x minus 1 plus 1 equals to 0 plus 1. So 2x equals to 1, x equals to a half. So that's our first value for x. So the second value for x, we are talking about x minus 1 equals to 0. So x minus 1 plus 1 equals to 0 plus 1. So x equals to 1. So x equals to a half or 1. So that is with what we call factorization. We can also come up with the second formula. We are talking about completing square method. Talking about completing square method. So we are talking about 2x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals to 0. So we make sure that the coefficient before the x squared is 1. So we are going to divide all through with 2. So 2x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals to 0. We divide by 2, we divide by 2, divide by 2, we divide by 2. So we are going to have x squared equals to 3 minus 3 over 2x plus a half equals to 0. We take this a half to the other side of the equation. We are going to have x squared minus 3 over 2x plus a half minus a half, to do away with it, equals to 0 minus a half. So we are going to have x squared minus 3 over 2x equals to negative a half. So the second part of what we are supposed to do, we are going to take this, then we are going to divide it by 2, then we square it. So we are going to add it in both sides. So we are going to have x squared. In that case, we remember the sign we have is negative sign. So we are going to take the negative sign with us. So we are going to have negative, but we are adding. But in the bracket, we are going to have negative 3 over 2 divided by 2. And now we are squaring it. Going to give us negative a half plus negative 3 over 2 over 2. And this one, we are squaring it, because we are adding both sides. So when we come to that point, we are going to break down and do away with that. So we are going to remain with the squared in this side. We are going to have x squared plus, this is like negative 3 over 2 over 4 squared. Then we are talking about negative a half. Then we are adding negative 3 over 4 squared. So we can open this bracket and say x squared is like minus 3 over 4 squared, negative and positive. Going to give us this negative a quarter, negative a half. We can square this in the bracket and it's going to give us a 9 over 16. Yes, 9 over 16 when we square. So we have minus plus 9 over 16. So in this case, we are going to have x minus 3 over 4 squared. So going to give us negative a half plus 9 over 16. And in this case, we use the LCM to solve for the right hand side. So the LCM is 16, and we are going to have negative 8 plus 9, which is going to be 1 over 16. So we have x minus 3 over 4 squared equals to 1 over 16. So to do away with the square, we multiply both sides with a half. So we're going to have 2 times a half. Then we are talking about 1 over 16 raised to power a half. So a half is like the square root. So we're going to have x minus 3 over 4 equals to 1 over 4. So equals to 1 over 4. So the 1 over 4 can either be positive or can either be negative, because when you are squaring a number, when you square negative 4 or negative or positive 4, you are going to get the same answer. So it's going to be plus or minus a quarter. So from this case, x is going to be given by plus or minus a quarter plus 3 over 4. So when we proceed, we are going to have x is given by plus or minus a quarter plus 3 over 4. So when we start with addition, x is going to be a quarter plus 3 over 4, which equals to 1. And when we talk about x equals to negative a quarter plus 3 over 4, it's going to give us 2 over 4, which equals to a half. So we are almost getting the same answer with what we conquered with from what you used the factorization method. So x is going to be 1 or a half. So then the final one, we are using the quadratic formula, and we are going to use it to solve the same equation, 2x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals to 0. So the quadratic formula is normally given as x equals to negative b plus or minus, in that case we are talking about b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So when you talk about a here, in our case a is the 2. When you talk about the b is this, we take it with the sign, it's with negative 3. And when you talk about the c is 1. So we substitute, and x is going to be given by negative b. So we are talking about negative b, so we are going to have negative, and here we have to have negative 3 plus or minus, we have our b, which is negative 3 squared minus 4a is 2, we are multiplying 2, and then c is 1. Then we are dividing by 2a, which is 2 into 2. So in that case, we are going to have, and minus multiply minus is going to be 3, plus or minus, a negative squared is going to be 9. Then we are minusing 4 times 2 times 1, that is 8. Then all of it is divided by 4. So in that case, we are going to have x is going to be given by 3 plus or minus 1, then we divide by 4. So x can be either be 3 plus 1 over 4 or 3 minus 1 over 4. And in that case, we are going to have 4 over 4, which equals to 1, or 2 over 4, which equals to a half. So it gives the same answer. So from there we can talk about what we refer to as inequalities. And inequalities, we call them, they are also functions. They are functions with less than, comma, greater than, comma, less than or equal to, that is less than or equal to, and greater than or equal to. We are talking about, so we are talking about inequalities are expressed in those signs. So we are talking about something like 3x is less than or equal to 6. So this is an inequality. We are talking about something like x minus 7 is greater than 2. That's an inequality. So how do we solve the inequalities? Inequalities, we solve them solving inequalities. We use the mathematical rules, maths rules of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So, for example, we have been given x minus 7 is greater than 2. So for this case, this is a subtraction rule. So it's going to be x minus 7 plus 7 greater than 2 plus 7. So x is greater than, when we had it is 9. So after realizing this, we express this in a number line. We express it in a number line. So we are going to have our number line, then we talk about 0, talk about -5, then maybe -10, it is continuing to negative infinity. We talk about 5, talk about 10, talk about 15, continuing to positive infinity. So our 9 is likely to be somewhere here. So we are talking about it is greater than, x is greater than 9. So x is going to take values to that side. So we are not going to z that point. And when you talk about, let us solve for 3x, example 2, 3x is less than or equal to 6. So we are going to use the division rule. So we are going to divide by 3, we divide by 3, x is less than or equal to 2. So we are going to have a number line to express that. We are going to have 0, talk about 1, 2, to positive infinity. We talk about -1, -2, to negative infinity. Here we are talking about 2. So this case, and x we are talking about is less than. So x is towards this side. And because it is equal to, the 2 is included, we said at the point where 2 is. So that's how we go about inequalities.